Shalom Akim. First and foremost, all praises and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Uh, and well, this is going to be part two to the video that I entitled Exposing BS from of the Civil Rights Movement and Black Lives Matter. This is going to be a pretty short one because I did a lot of reading in part one, basically exposing that civil rights movement, letting you know that it wasn't for us. But this is going to be the correlation between Black Lives Matter and the civil rights movement. So, and first scripture I'm going to bring out is 2 Corinthians 2:11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. Because when you look at the civil rights movement, what happened was they made the movement, basically it was, they made the movement so-called based off black people, based off so-called black people. And it was started in about 1954, the civil rights movement. It was started in, 1954 to 1968. And then, after about 1960, that's when they were pretty much done integrating Jake into their society, or you so-called black people into their society. What is it? Severe. This is post-60s civil rights movement. Severe government repression and assassination of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and the intense infighting with the black militant community caused a decline in the protests after the 1960s. And the truth is, basically, they murdered and assassinated Malcolm X and Martin Luther King because after the 1960s, they were done integrating Jake into their society. Malcolm X was like, hey man, y'all need to get the fuck away from these Edomites, these so-called white people. And Martin Luther King, he was a good soldier to integrate Jake into their society with the non-violent speeches. And then he realized that he was wrong, so they had to off him too. And coincidentally, to get people to forget about the civil rights movement or what it was really about, that's when the feminist movement started. What was it? The 1960s to 1970s American feminist movement, breaking down barriers for women, and they integrated it into the civil rights movement. And not only that, they also integrated the gay rights movement in the 1960s and 70s. Talking about so-called gays, or actually homosexuals, had to have rights as well. What was it? Gay rights movement of the 1970s, and really it started in the mid to late 1960s, which was to overshadow the civil rights movement as far as the so-called blacks are concerned, because all they wanted to do during the civil rights movement was to integrate Jake into their societies so they can learn from Jake and also keep an eye on Jake and keep them down. If you watched my first video, you pretty much seen I gave a good clear history on that. So what does Black Lives Matter have to do with all of this? Well, Black Lives Matter, when you look at their principles, their guiding principles, it says it all. When you look at it, diversity, we committed to acknowledging, respecting, celebrating differences and commonalities. Restorative justice. We are committed to collectively, lovingly, and courageously working vigorously for freedom and justice for black people. And you got to understand, we're not black. The so-called Negroes, Indians, Latino are actually Israelites. If you call yourself black, hey, you're gonna die black. And by extension, all people. They including all people with black people. As we forge our path, we intentionally build and nurture a beloved community that is bonded together through a beautiful struggle that is restorative, not depleting. Bullshit. Unapologetically black. What the fuck is that? You know what I'm saying? If you fall for this bullshit, hey, this it's on you. The Lord is just gonna kill you, and it's your own fault. But unapologetically we are unapologetically black in our position and affirming that Black Lives Matter. We need not qualify our position to love, desire freedom, justice for ourselves, and necessary prerequisites for wanting the same for others. Bullshit. And then this is where you get into the bullshit, the similarities of the civil rights movement, transgender affirming. Now, in the scriptures, the Lord ain't dealing with no goddamn LGBTQ, whatever the Lord ain't dealing with no homosexuality. They're supposed to be put to death. And it's not the same for a nationality is not the same for a sexual preference. But anyway, we are committed to embracing and making space for trans brothers and sisters to participate and lead. And that's when you start getting to the truth. Collective value, we are guided by fact all Black Lives Matter regardless of perceived sexual identity. Because the more you read these guiding principles, the more it starts to get clearer what this movement is all about. Globalism, you know, it's about globalism, transgenders, basically homosexuals, black women. What is it? We are committing to building a black women affirming space free from sexism, misogyny, and male-centeredness. Basically, this is all about anti-so-called black men, black villages. We are committed to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure required by supporting each other as extended families. What's the Western prescribed nuclear family? Man, woman, and child. That is the Western prescribed nuclear family. In other words, they want to get rid of the man, and more to the point, the so-called black man. Then you got, empathy. We are committed to practicing empathy. We engage with comrades, intend to learn, and connect with their context. Bullshit. Black families. We are committed to making our spaces family-friendly and enabling parents to fully participate with their children. We are committed to dismantling the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts and require them to mother in private even as they participate in justice work. In other words, they're trying to dismantle the patriarchy. But they're only doing it in the so-called black families. Then, of course, you got queer affirming. I don't need to read all this. You can read it if you want to, but I don't need to read all this. Loving engagement is more bullshit. Like I said, I'm going to click on it so you can see it. You can read it if you want to, but I'm not going to read it. And then you got, intergenerational. And all of this is all bullshit, even black villages. And it basically just tells you that it's not for you so-called black people. More to the point, it's not for you so-called black men. And like I said, we're not black in the first place. We're Israelites from what our respective tribes. And then when you do research, it is funded by a so-called Jew named George Soros. But before we get into that, basically I'm just pointing out the correlation between Black Lives Matter and the Civil Rights Movement. Like I mentioned, the Civil Rights Movement was eventually overshadowed by the feminist movement and the so-called gay rights movement. So Black Lives Matter is basically an anti-patriarchal feminist gay rights movement. Basically to get rid of you so-called black men and affirm queers or homosexuals and affirm transgenders. That's what it's all about. They just integrated the gay rights movement and the feminist movement into the civil rights movement and called it Black Lives Matter. So they can piggyback off you so-called black people. And I meant to say piggyback because this don't got nothing to do with lamb. This is nothing to do with righteousness, you know. And like I said, it was funded by George Soros, and I'm gonna read a paragraph out of this article. Black Lives Matter is a group that was started by 3 women that work at Soros-backed organizations that are into community organizing, into kind of riling up activists. She said, okay, so basically, George Soros-backed organizations, they found three so-called black women to start this Black Lives Matter. This is George Soros, which he's a fake Jew. And then on top of that, let's see, these are the black women that are the heads of Black Lives Matter. Opal Tome, a New York-based Nigerian American strategist and community organizer. Now, remember, all three of these women work for Soros-backed organizations. So that's how Black Lives Matter really started. I don't care how they say it started. They all work for the same so-called Jew, for the same, for all the organizations that he owns, and then their movement is backed by him over $33 million. So that's what got this transgender, queer affirming feminist rights movement started, and they called it Black Lives Matter, just to piggyback off black people. And I'm calling you black on purpose because it's a real insult to be called anything other than what you really are, which are Israelites. And then, you know, Alicia Garza, you can read her information if you want, and Patrice Coolers. Now, I forgot where I saw it, but this woman, she's a lesbian. They say one of the other two women are lesbian as well. However, they're all feminists. And their movement, basically, you know, I've read the guiding principles to let you know that this is a feminist gay rights movement. It's not for you so-called black men, you Israelite men. This is not for you. And that's the same thing as the civil rights movement. It was never for you so-called black people. That's why they integrated it with the feminist movement and the gay rights movement. They just put it all together this time, so nobody could say anything about it once it started, you know. And this was an article in Yes Magazine that I just wanted to point out this first statement. The title is, I assumed it was racism, it was patriarchy. Why are some women more invisible than others? To grow new anti-patriarchal movements like Black Lives Matter, we need to start opening our eyes. You know, and you can read the bullshit down here if you want to, but I'm not going to get into all her bullshit, you know, all the bullshit of the lady that wrote it, which is Akiba Solomon, you know. But you can read the article if you want to, but this is all that, you know, it's just blatantly saying that Black Lives Matter is an anti-patriarchal movement, and they talk all types of crap about so-called black men, even though so-called black men in the 50s and 60s was trying to uplift the so-called black nation. As a matter of fact, if you watch my first video, it just shows what happens when you so-called Negroes get together and these Edomites is out of it. You know, leave these Edomites out of your shit. You know, we were millionaires back then. But, you know, prophecy had to be fulfilled, so you know Esau wasn't going to leave us alone. He had to blow that shit up because the Lord had prophecies to fulfill, and this is not our rest. Now, I got a couple more scriptures. Says, Isaiah 10:1, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and write that grievous which they prescribe. In other words, these Edomites, they got the Black Lives Matter basically so they can upset the so-called white people, you know, so-called police and all this other stuff, so they can rile up this race war, which the Lord is really doing it. Yahweh Shem Yahushua is the one really doing it. But they think they're setting it up to do this race riot and get the police against so-called black people. You know, that's what Esau thinks, because he's trying to make this happen. He's the one that made Black Lives Matter, you know. Then Jeremiah 14, let me get off with Ephesians 5:15 first. See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. You know, you got to know the things that you're getting into, because this ain't for black people. This is for the elect of Israel. You know, if you was thinking about uh, checking out Black Lives Matter or doing their marches or whatever, and you're part of, you're an Israelite and you know you're an Israelite, man, fuck that shit. This is not for you. This don't got nothing to do with us. You know, it was started by a so-called Jew, and it's for these so-called black women. This is all worldly shit. You know. And then the last scripture is Jeremiah 14 and 11. Then said Yahweh Bashem Yahushai unto me, pray not for this people for their good. In other words, anybody that's into this shit, man, fuck them. You know, just a little story I done told somebody that I work with about what's really going on with this Black Lives Matter shit. And hey, a week later, he's still wearing the Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Even after I told him what this Black Lives Matter shit is really all about, you know. So he's not circumspect. He ain't trying to get the truth. He's comfortable in this society. So, you know, the Lord said, pray not for this people for their good. In other words, fuck these people. When black people start dying, forget them. They're not Israelites. They're not part of the elect. And with that, you know, I'm going to say shalom till next time. Shalom Akim.